It is Friday, May 17th, and you are listening to Darker Than Blue here on WPFW 89.3 in Washington, D.C. I am your host, Jackie Lukeman. Sean Blackman is not with us today. He's taking a well-deserved break. We are still your number one source for struggle, socialism, and soul. So glad to see and hear and be with all of you today on this cloudy, overcast, but feeling pretty good outside Friday. I am absolutely hoping that people are doing well as you're tuning in and listening to Darker Than Blue here this afternoon on this lovely Friday. We will have a guest shortly. I hope he'll be able to dial in from Iran because that's what we're going to talk about a little bit on the show today. But if you've been listening to WPFW the past week, you also know that we are in the midst of our spring drive. And you know what? I know that, these calls for supporters every once in a while, a few times a year, a little, frustrating for people. But listen, WPFW is your radio station. This radio station is not owned by a corporate entity. We don't get an edict from on high telling us what we can and cannot report on. Certainly, that's why Darker Than Blue, Sean Blackman, and myself, Jackie Lukeman, jumped at the opportunity to have a show here on WPFW because of our commitment to anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, anti-settler colonial policy that we understand has shaped and continues to invoke a horrible legacy on people in this country, but also the way that that same system has spread throughout the world, and we're seeing the fruits, the rotten fruit from the tree of imperialism produce all over the world in many different places, Palestine, Iran, the Congo, Burkina Faso, Niger, wherever in the world, Pakistan. Name a place in the world where people are fighting for their liberation against a repressive imperialist government hell-bent on imposing capitalist dictatorship on the people, and the people don't have control of their resources, so they get no benefit from the resources that's in their land, in their ground that they live on. And we will show you repeatedly over and over again on this show, and honestly, in the work that we do outside of this show, because Sean and I are organizers, that's why we do what we do. But we'll show you over and over again where people around the world are struggling against repressive governments for liberation and national sovereignty to not be interfered with by the United States and its allies. Certainly, we will show you how the US and its imperialistic, hegemonic interference is the cause of the unrest in these countries. So, very rarely do you get this kind of news, this kind of analysis, this kind of unapologetic anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, pan-African, international solidarity, anti-Zionist analysis. You don't get it anywhere on the radio other than a station like WPFW. And here in the DC area, WPFW is it for us. I have certainly learned a lot about politics and history and even culture from this station, being a DC resident since I was 6 years old, growing up listening to local DC radio. And WPFW has been doing this for 47 years. 47 years, folks, of unapologetic, unflinching journalism and just this wonderful reputation of being the encyclopedia, almost the encyclopedia for liberation on the radio. Where else do you get to hear about the liberation struggles of people in other countries like Peru or Argentina or Cuba or Chile or Nicaragua or Venezuela, countries that have fought their revolution against imperialism and won in the case of Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. But then we're hearing from them, at least we try to bring to you on Darker Than Blue and other stations on this network, stories of people who are struggling to defend their revolution in their countries from constant US imperialist aggression and attacks, because the United States government is still angry that those governments, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, had the nerve to oppose US hegemony and defeat it and kick it out of their countries. So we see with the example of these countries that we don't just win the revolution against capitalism and imperialism. We have to defend our revolution against those things as well. And this is what we talk about here on Darker Than Blue every Friday. We have 60 minutes. It's not a whole lot of time, but Sean and I are committed to bringing these issues of people's struggle for liberation to you in this 60 minutes, no matter how many times we have to talk about a topic to make sure we get it all in there for you to understand, no matter how many times we'll bring the same guest over or different guests over to help explain to you what's going on. We're committed to telling the truth about what's going on in the world so we, in the beating heart of the empire, can make better decisions about our role in these policies and decisions. This is important information. This information about the struggle for liberation around the world, because all of the problems that people around the world face, many of them, if not almost all of them, are connected to US imperialism. And we are responsible as those living in the beating heart of empire to address the issues that we have the ability to address. You can't address those issues without proper information. So, this is what we feel our role is here at Darker Than Blue. For us, for Sean and myself, this is not just a show, this is our responsibility to talk about these issues of freedom and liberation and national sovereignty and oppression. What is apartheid? What is Zionism? What's the difference between Zionism and Judaism? And what does Zionism have to do with imperialism? All of these things and so much more that we believe it's important for us to talk about. That's why we do this show on WPFW. And that's why we're thankful that WPFW has given us this platform to do this. So we are asking for a couple of things in this fund drive from you, our listeners. First of all, we're asking for you to weigh in on what you think about the show so far. We're the new kids on the block almost. So you've kind of felt us out, and we hope that you're enjoying what we're bringing. If you are, we're asking for you to please become a sustainer, a new sustainer for WPFW. Did you know that over 80%, almost 90% of the people who listen to WPFW regularly, all the time, almost every day, do not actually pledge to the station? And this is very important because did you know that WPFW is listener supported? Like I said at the beginning, we're not corporate sponsored. WPFW is not. So we don't have a big corporation paying our bills and paying our salaries. The hosts of some of our favorite shows are not paid. We are volunteers. We do this because this is our labor of love, and we believe it is our responsibility to do this. And we are proud of the information that we bring people, but we would ask that you support us and show your pride in supporting WPFW and your favorite stations by becoming a sustainer. You can make a pledge and pay it over time, over 12 months, so that you can make a larger footprint in supporting WPFW over a long period of time. And then you get certain perks for that. But you know what? The biggest perk is the fact that you are helping shows stay on WPFW with your donations, with your sustainer pledges, by becoming a new member with just a $40 pledge. That's right. You could be a new member in WPFW supporters by just pledging $40. You can pledge $20. You can pledge $240 and break the pledges out to what is that? $20 a month. That's right. You can support WPFW, your favorite shows on WPFW. We hope that your favorite show is Darker Than Blue, but you can go to pledge.wpfwfm.org right now and select Darker Than Blue from the drop down list. Choose your level of support. Choose how you want to pay that level of support, all at once or over 12 months. And you are a supporter of not only WPFW, but of your favorite show, which again, I hope is Darker Than Blue. But you can also call right now and pledge whatever you can pledge to keep this show and this station on the air. You can call right now at 202-588-9739 or 1-800-222-9739 to pledge your donation to keep Darker Than Blue on the air and to keep WPFW on the air. Every show on the network has a pledge goal. Our show is $600. We have to make $600 in pledges for the hour. So please pick up the phone, call right now, 1-800-222-9739 or 202-588-9739 and pledge your support to Darker Than Blue. $40 basic WPFW membership, $25 basic Pacifica membership. You can pay all at once. You can become a sustainer by breaking your pledge up into 12 payments. So you can absolutely make that $240, $340 pledge, $500 pledge, even $1,000 pledge, because you can break that major pledge amount, that total pledge amount, up into 12 payments. So you're paying for that pledge over 12 months. You don't have to pay it all at once. We need your support, friends and listeners and comrades. We absolutely need all of the support we can get from you. So please call us now at 202-588-9739 or 1-800-222-9739 and pledge your support to Darker Than Blue and pledge your support to keep WPFW on the air. Another cool thing that we get to do on this show is that they let us broadcast this show through Zoom so that you can see us on video. So for those of you who are watching right now on Black Power Media, on YouTube, on Twitch, on, let's see, where else? Facebook, if you're watching Luke Mon Nation on YouTube, if you're watching Luke Mon Nation on Facebook, Black Power Media on Facebook. If you are in the chat in Black Power Media, yes, ladies and gentlemen, you too can pledge, because I have dropped the pledge sheet into the chat for you, so that while you are watching us have this wonderful show that other people are listening to. Don't we love technology? We do. We do love technology because it helps spread this education for liberation, this encyclopedia, this chapter of the Encyclopedia for Liberation that WPFW has created for us, being the University for Liberation for the Washington, D.C. metro area. We are proud of that. And we're thankful that we're able to do it, but we need your help to continue doing it, because we are listener supported, no commercials, no ad revenue, none of that kind of stuff. You're not going to hear commercials about survival rations or investing in gold or, hair care products. Or we don't get money from anybody else other than our listeners. So WPFW has been on the air being the University of Liberation, the Free University of Liberation, might I add, for 47 years because the listeners have made sure that WPFW stays on the air. So we are asking our listeners to continue to support us in that way. Call us right now, 202 588 9739. Again, that's 202 588 9739 or 1 800 222 9739. Call right now. Our call takers are standing by, waiting to answer the phone, waiting to pick up the call, waiting for your pledge for Darker Than Blue this hour. Please don't let Darker Than Blue down. Sean is a little bit under the weather. Don't make him feel worse by not calling in and supporting our show. We appreciate you so much. And if you're online, you can go right now to pledge.wpfwfm.org to submit your pledge in that way. Be sure to select Darker Than Blue with Jacqueline Luqman, that's me, and Sean Blackman from the drop down menu when you do. So we were hoping to have our guest on to talk about Iran right now. And it is an 8-hour time difference in between us and Iran. So I'm hoping that he can join us shortly. But before we get him on, while he's working out his technical issues, let's talk about why Iran is such an important part of the issues that we are seeing in what is known as the Middle East today. So, if you have not been paying attention, of course, Iran has been like the unstated other target of Israel and the U.S. long before this latest crisis that was exposed. It did not start, but it was exposed with Al-Aqsa flood on October 7th. So why is that? There's been a long-standing tension between Israel and Iran, largely because Iran is probably the largest military power in that region. Iran and the U.S. have not been friends. So the U.S. and Israel have always known that Iran was not going to just accept this ungodly deal that created the nation state of Israel. And if you are not clear that the establishment of Israel through the United Nations itself was an illegal and a backdoor and a surreptitious act that the Zionists and the U.S. carried out. You need to be clear about that, because the UN vote to partition Palestine happened in phases. The first phase, most countries voted against the partition because they understood that no entity had a right to divide up somebody else's country and give one part to another group of people, because that would disenfranchise the people who are already living in that country. And Iran was one of the countries that was always like, this is a bad idea. We should not be doing this. No, we're not going to agree to it. But Iran also has its own unique history with the United States that we'll touch on in a minute. But the second vote of that UN partition to that second vote of the UN resolution to partition Palestine, do you know that the only reason that resolution vote passed was because the United States and the Zionist lobby threatened or coerced other countries' representatives to vote for the partition. And if they didn't, the United States would either withdraw or withhold aid, deny other kinds of assistance, or flat out threatened countries with sanctions or coups. There were documented incidents of the spouses of these foreign diplomats being given very expensive gifts as a bribe. There were documented incidents of the diplomats themselves being bribed with money or very expensive gifts, or some type of aid or that type of thing from the United States. But the UN resolution to partition Palestine from for to give I think at the time it was 48% of Palestine to establish the state of Israel. The way that was done was illegal. It was done by coercion, bribes, and threats by the US and the Zionist lobby. So the vote itself was invalid. And it's very interesting that people don't talk about this part of the establishment of Israel, of the state of Israel, because the establishment of the state of Israel itself is illegal, which makes the state of Israel itself invalid. It is an illegal, oppressive, occupying, and apartheid white supremacist entity. All right. So the idea that the entity that allowed the illegal partition of Palestine to happen, the illegal bribes and the coercion and that kind of stuff to force countries to vote against their interests and the interests of the Palestinian people, the UN should not have allowed that vote to proceed, but they did. So that ought to give you an idea, folks, of the kind of liberal institution that even the United Nations is. They are beholden to the power of the United States, and they're really, history has shown us, they will not go much farther than where the United States tells them they will go. So when we're talking about illegality and Israel and particularly coming from this country, whenever it says of other countries that their elections are illegal and their elections are not valid, or there were discrepancies in the election, that's rich coming from the country whose government bribed other countries' governments and threatened other countries' governments to vote for a partition that took land from another country, another people, and gave it to other folks. But even after that, the people who received that land were not happy with the fact that, okay, now they have had a place where they can settle and be safe. They weren't happy with the small bit of land that they were allocated, or that they were going to be allocated according to that UN resolution. No, they started a war. They did. They started a war. Of course, the Arabs were not happy that the United Nations decided to take their land and give it to the Zionists, when the Arabs in Palestine were fine with sharing their land. They understood what the Holocaust was. They understood what the Nazis did to Poles and intellectuals and socialists and communists and the Roma people and disabled people and the Jews. They understood that. And they were not saying that Jews could not be here at all, but they understood that they were already occupied by the British, and they did not trust the British, obviously, since the British were occupying them already and were already oppressing them. It was the British that began the ethnic cleansings, the pogroms, clearing out villages of their inhabitants to make way for the Zionists, to literally push the Arabs, the Palestinians, Arab Christians, Muslims, and Jews. You do understand that Arabs are of all faiths. So it was the British who began the pogroms of pushing the Palestinians out of villages and giving those villages to the Zionists. But the Zionists were not happy with the land that they were allocated. So they pushed for more. And of course, the people living in the land fought for their land. Of course they did. So that is where the 6 Day War came from. If I'm not conflating my timeline too much. And of course, the nations surrounding Palestine came to the defense of Palestine because first Britain was occupying Palestine, and the nations in the region were upset at Britain. I'm sorry, I almost forgot I was on the radio. Those FCC rules. And where else are you going to get honest broadcasting like this other than on WPFW, friends? Support us now. Become a new supporter, a new sustainer today. Call us right now, 202-588-9739 or 1-800-222-9739 to become a new sustainer of WPFW supporting Darker Than Blue right now. So of course, the countries in the region surrounding Palestine see what the British and the United Nations and the United States have done to Palestine. And the issue was not that the Arabs didn't want Jews in the region. Jews have lived in that region along with people of every other faith for centuries. The interesting thing is the Zionist settlers in Israel today are Europeans. They are not the original Hebrew folks from the Bible or the Torah, if that's what we're basing this idea that Israel has a right to that land on, which we shouldn't be, but that's a conversation for another day. But the people who took the land that was allocated to them illegally and unjustly by the UN, decided they wanted all of it. And this was always the plan, by the way. This was not a situation where people were escaping from the Holocaust and they found themselves in Palestine and said, well, this is a nice enough place. The people seem to be okay. I guess we'll settle here. No. The Zionists Zionism is a political ideology, not a religious ideology that was begun. It was created by Theodore Herzl. And Herzl, who was an atheist, didn't believe in God, didn't believe that a Jewish state had to have a connection to Judaism. So even in Herzl's mind, he understood, he knew that Zionism was not the same as Judaism because he himself was a non-observant, atheist European Jew who was also of the upper class. So he thought that the Zionist state could be a place for poor Jews who were probably very religiously observant and would not assimilate in European countries like he and other wealthy Jews had. So they needed to have a place away from Europe where they couldn't or wouldn't assimilate. And it didn't even have to have anything to do with religion. That's what Zionism is. It has nothing to do with religion, but it is being conflated with Judaism. But the man who created it never conflated Zionism with Judaism. So in all of this, and yay, our guest is here, in all of this, there is the issue of the countries surrounding the area. And one of them is Iran. And I'm very happy to be joined by our guest to give us some clarity on this. Dr. Syed Mohammed Marandi, professor of English literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. Dr. Marandi, are you there? Uh-oh, I saw him and then there he is. It is fantastic to see you and hear from you again, Dr. Marandi. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Fantastic. Now, I understand it is very early in Iran right now. It is 1 o'clock in the morning, so I am extra thankful that you have stayed up so late after just returning from Syria to speak to us. particularly today, as we're in the middle of our fund drive, and we need people to see the value in this programming on WPFW. So I'm hoping that people really appreciate Dr. Marandi being here under these circumstances and give us a call and become a sustainer and a new member of WPFW. So, Dr. Marandi, you just came from Syria. What's going on in Syria now that we are, how many days has it been? It's more than 200 days, I think, since Al-Aqsa flood. Every indication seems to be that Benjamin Netanyahu will not end this genocide. He has now begun bombing Rafah. Uh, the IOF controls the border of Rafah, and if it has not already happened, they're still talking about a ground invasion. And of course, at the same time, the US and Israel were bombing Syria because the Houthis were doing the job in the Red Sea, saying not one ship will pass through these straits as long as Israel continues to bomb Gaza. So, what is the situation now where the US and Israel are clearly still in a very mutually genocidal relationship? There is going to be no stopping of what's going on now in Rafah. Have the bombs stopped dropping in Syria? And what are the plans this moment for what comes next? Now that we understand the next is a continuation of genocide.
Well, you're absolutely correct. The situation is very complicated, and Netanyahu wants to continue with the genocide, but he is facing tremendous difficulties in Gaza. He's failed. In Rafah, he will fail. In Lebanon, he's also failed. The Lebanese are now using more advanced weapons that they were holding back before. And as you pointed out, the Houthis, or Ansarullah, the Yemeni armed forces, have blocked the Red Sea for Israeli shipping or ships linked to Israel, as well as that of the United States and the UK after they attacked Yemen. So it is a very difficult situation for the Americans and the Israelis. Syria is very important. Syria has been there to assist the Palestinians for many decades. In fact, the leaders of Hamas were based in Syria until the troubles began, the dirty war in Syria began. And the reason why the United States, its regional allies, and oil-rich family dictatorships wanted to undermine Syria was because of Israel. Because Syria was the link to Lebanon, to the resistance movements. As I said, Hamas was based there. Islamic Jihad was also there as well. And Syria was assisting the resistance in Lebanon and elsewhere. So what the Americans and the Israelis wanted to do was to undermine the country so that that bridge will be broken. And a lot of people bought into the propaganda. Oil-rich dictatorships in the region were spreading sectarian hatred through their media, using international satellites, and no one was complaining about it. The United States was pretending that it was supporting democracy in Syria, whereas in fact, very early on in Syria, in fact, on February the 12th, 2012, Jake Sullivan, the current U.S. National Security Advisor, sent an email to Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State at that time, saying that in Syria, Al-Qaeda is our ally, or is on our side. So this is literally a decade after 9/11, and where the Americans are again, and also they were working with Al-Qaeda in Libya, and they undermined the Libyan government and murdered the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. And many of these fighters they lived in Europe. In fact, if you recall, there was a mass killing in Manchester, UK, at a concert, and the young man who carried this out was one of those extremists that was fighting in Libya, and he and his father had links to British intelligence. So the Americans and the British and their allies were working with Al Qaeda and Al Qaeda affiliates or Al Qaeda affiliates. And later on, ISIS, which emerged, came out of Al Qaeda. It was Al Qaeda, and then Al Qaeda or Al Qaeda broke into two, and ISIS was the new powerful faction that existed between Syria and Iraq. But the interesting thing is that even when it comes to ISIS, we have the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency document of 2012, where the United States said that its regional allies were trying to create a Salafist entity between Syria and Iraq. And later on, General Michael Flynn, the well-known Trump supporter, said that the United States government under Obama, and he was the head of the organization at that time when that document was written, supported the creation of that Salafist entity between Syria and Iraq because they wanted to surround Syria. And so they wanted to break its link with Iraq. So who was that? What was that Salafist entity? It was ISIS. So the United States and its allies were behind the creation of ISIS. The United States was allied with Al Qaeda. And then later on, when Kerry became Secretary of State, he, in a leaked audio when he was speaking to the so-called Syrian opposition at the UN building, I think, he said that we allowed ISIS to advance on Damascus. So you get how vast this conspiracy was to undermine Syria, to destroy Syria. Syria was the bridge that supported the Palestinians and the Lebanese resistance, and the Americans and their regional allies and the Israelis were supporting ISIS and Al Qaeda. Both ISIS and Al Qaeda were in bases alongside the Syrian Golan, the occupied Syrian Golan, and the Israelis were funding them. They were giving them weapons and ammunition. They were treating the injured terrorists in their hospitals. This is all documented. People can find it online. And also, when the Syrian army tried to attack ISIS or Al Qaeda positions, the Israelis would bomb the Syrians in support of ISIS and Al Qaeda. There are bases of both, as I said, both ISIS and Al Qaeda there. So ultimately, the Syrians and their allies were able to defeat ISIS. And of course, General Soleimani, who Trump murdered, was key to this. And he pushed back ISIS and Al Qaeda on different fronts, both in Syria and Iraq, along with his companions and his allies. So there was a bit of this after ISIS was defeated. There was stability, but unfortunately, the Americans saw they didn't want Syria to become unified and whole, so they occupied 1/3 of Syria. And they occupied some of the most key areas, the oil-producing areas, as well as the agricultural areas. The Turks, who are in NATO, they occupied another part, and of course, Israel occupies a part of Syria too. So the situation for the Syrian government is very difficult, and for the Syrian people, because the West has also imposed huge sanctions on the country directed at ordinary people to destroy the economy, to make people suffer as much as possible, as the Americans do in Cuba and in Venezuela. But Syria has the added misery of coming out of this dirty war. So this time, the Israelis, since they failed in undermining Syria, they in the United States, Syria continues to support the resistance as we speak. They continue to support them against the Israeli onslaught. And so that is why the Israeli regime has been bombing Syria, and in particular why it's been bombing Iranian military officials who've been in Syria to fight against ISIS, but who also support the resistance. So recently, as you know, they bombed the embassy,
Mhm.
killing a number of people. I think 12, if I'm not mistaken. And the Iranians said that they're going to retaliate. Of course, Iran first went to the UN Security Council. The United States, Britain, France refused to have Israel condemned for bombing an Iranian embassy, and which I think is a huge scandal in itself.
It is.
And yeah, absolutely.
It's,
And
isn't that supposed to be basically a declaration of war, if not an
yes,
international war crime?
that's right. In fact, no, it's unprecedented for an embassy to be intentionally bombed. There was an instance where the Americans bombed the Chinese embassy in Yugoslavia, in Belgrade, but the Americans claimed it was an accident. The Chinese don't buy it, but the Americans claim. But this was an intentional targeting, and the number of people killed was much higher. And the United States, and this is something really unprecedented in international relations. So the Iranians decided to retaliate. I went to, and you know the rest, you know this. I mean, your viewers, I'm sure they're all very politically aware, like yourself. So I won't go down and explain further. But on my during my trip to Syria, I did visit the embassy twice. Uh, it is working as it did before. The
Mm.
building, the consulate building, of course, is completely destroyed. The Iranians rented another building for consular services. But the most important thing was that the belief in Damascus. I've spoken to the Venezuelan ambassador, the Cuban ambassador. We had lunch and dinner together. I spoke with uh, the Syrian foreign minister. I've spoken with a number of other senior people in Syria. I've met with them, and the mood in Syria is one of confidence.
Mm.
The Israelis miscalculated. They drew global condemnation, and except for the West, which is isolated. But the international community condemned the Israeli regime, and they supported Iran's strike against Syria. And now the belief in Damascus is that the Israelis are going to behave more cautiously. And so far, that's what we've seen.
Hmm.
Now that it remains to be seen, maybe Netanyahu will carry out another outrage. But if he does try to strike Iranian assets or targets, the Iranians have said that they're going to strike back, but this time much harder. So the mood in Syria is very positive, and there were. I was told that when the Iranians struck, the Israelis, people went out on the streets and gave sweets, and they celebrated, like people in the West Bank and Gaza did too, from what we've seen. But the mood is good. The economic situation is very difficult. Americans are holding the people by the throat. But like Venezuela, like Cuba, uh, the Americans have failed in undermining the state.
Dr. Miranda, do you think that the United States has, and certainly Israel, because they're always punching above their weight, but they only punch above their weight because they understand that they have their big brother, the heavyweight champion, the United States military, in behind it. But do you think this time the United States has spread itself too thin by getting involved in everybody's business all over the place at one time? Because the United States is still trying not to get kicked out of some African nations. They are so now the facade of AFRICOM is coming off, and people are now calling for all of AFRICOM to leave, which is exactly what we want. So the United States is fighting for its militaristic life on the continent. It's still propping up right-wing leaders in the global South, but the people are fighting up against them. And the United States doesn't have a lot of resources to send to back those people up. So, They're just having to fight the people in the streets. Those puppet leaders are. And now the United States is involved in, sending all of this money and all of this obscene weaponry to Israel, while the United States is also bombing Syria, and making threats against Iran and sending weapons to Taiwan as well, and Ukraine. So has the United States military, specifically the militaristic aspect of it, has this entity stretched itself too thin too many times at this point? And has it reached a point where the elasticity is not there the way it used to be maybe in the 40s and 50s?
Yes, I think that is a key reason why the United States is failing. And that's a key reason why it's failing on all fronts. It's not just failing on this front, but it's failing everywhere. As you pointed out, we see the gradual collapse of the empire across Africa. We see failure in Ukraine. The United States is antagonizing China and pushing China and Russia closer to each other, as we just saw from when we through the in this on the scenes in China where the Russian and Chinese presidents were negotiating, and of course the United States is pushing Iran, Russia, and China closer to each other, and a host of other countries. That's why BRICS has now been formed. So these perpetual wars has worn down the U.S. military, but more importantly, it's worn down the U.S. economy, and even more important than that, it is discrediting the United States. People across the world see the United States as a militaristic regime that will not stop killing. It will not stop invading. It will not stop destroying. It's not just Ukraine. We have to go back, of course, and remember Afghanistan, the dirty war there, 20 years of occupation. Then we had Iraq. We had Libya, which is often forgotten. The United States has destroyed the country. It's the most prosperous country in Africa has been completely demolished, thanks to the United States and its European allies. We had the genocidal war in Yemen, where the United States and the Saudis and the Emiratis and the whole Europe and North and Canada were battering the Yemeni people for a decade and imposing a starvation siege. So the United States has created great misery across the world. But by doing so, it has depleted its own resources. It has discredited itself. It has destroyed its soft power. And I think the two wars now, the war in Ukraine and the war against the Palestinian people, alongside the rising antagonism towards China, this is, I think, this is breaking the back of the U.S. empire.
And you said a couple of minutes ago, Dr. Morandi, the U.S. always tries to discredit other countries like Iran, and I find this news story, and this is a little bit funny, but it's not funny because this is an instance of the U.S. trying to discredit Iran in the kind of the most ridiculous way. Now, apparently, there was some concert in Iran recently. And like 260 people were arrested. But because, if I'm understanding this correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, in Iran, rock music and heavy metal music is verboten. It's not. It is considered by the religious institutions. It's considered satanic or Satanist. And if people are laughing when I say that about the religious establishment in Iran, thinking that, I want to remind people about satanic panic in the United States in the 80s and how many people were falsely imprisoned for all kinds of crimes, up to including child abuse, child sexual abuse, and murder, because people in this country believed that people were worshiping Satan. And so when I saw this story, Dr. Morandi, that is the first thing I thought of. Oh my God, they are deploying satanic panic in Iran. How did they do that? So what is the deal with this big deal? Because this story got picked up by the AP. It got picked up by Reuters. And how can this story be this big of a deal that those entities would pick it up, but we had a whole satanic panic here in this country. So what is happening with this crazy story? And is it as crazy as I think it is?
Well, I haven't heard the story, uh, so I can't comment on this. It sounds a a bit strange because if you go to a coffee shops, or if you go to malls, if you go to if you drive around in a taxi, if you sit in the metro, you're going to see or hear all sorts of music being played by different people who have different tastes. So in malls, just like in the United States, each shop that you go into, if you're walking through the halls, you're going to, when you walk from A to B, you're going to be hearing different types of music. So I haven't seen people in the malls or the coffee shops being arrested for music yet. So we'll have to wait for that. But there are cases when the police raid uh, private parties, and
Mm-hmm.
that is usually it's because of uh, maybe neighbors complaining, and then they find illicit, I don't know, drugs or maybe alcohol, because alcohol is tolerated in private, but it is forbidden. But if it's given to in a large party, then that would be breaking the law. The law in Iran is that no one is allowed to intrude in people's private uh, uh, affairs. So at home, if
Really?
someone, yes, without it, no one is allowed to uh, go into your home and just figure out if you have alcohol, or if you have drugs, or what sort of relationships you have with people. What does violate the law is if it becomes a public matter.
Mm.
If, for example, someone has a party and he's giving drugs or alcohol or whatever, alcohol in Iran is forbidden. But as I said, the private sphere and the public sphere are two separate things. But I haven't heard of this particular story. I'd have to
Mm.
look it up. But it's not because someone was playing music. That's definitely not the case.
And see, that's why I brought it up, because I kind of figured it was so just weird and esoteric. And I kind of thought Dr. Morandi probably does not know about this story, but I bet you he can dispel some of the myths that the story is woven around. And you did, because there's this idea, and the way it's reported, that, look, heavy metal music is considered satanic in Iran, and they will come and arrest you for that kind of stuff. And I thought that was very interesting, because we know, as you pointed out, the United States does a really, well, they think they do a great job in demonizing other countries. And I felt that this story was another attempt at the United States to do just that, to paint Iran as a bunch of, crazy fundamentalist, intolerant monsters who think that heavy metal music is satanic. But again, the United States thought that heavy metal music was satanic. Like, there was a
One,
whole. No, go ahead.
one thing that I should add, or a couple of things. One is that I live in Tehran, and so I live in an apartment like most people in Tehran.
Mm-hmm.
And and of course, we have the apartment buildings all around us, or buildings with many apartments in them all around us. And in our neighborhood, there are a couple of homes that regularly have parties, and they're very loud, and they continue till like 1 a.m. One is, literally across the street, and one is on this side of the street, and the neighborhood knows who they are,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be pretty irritating. But I've never seen police cars come and take them away or anything like
You've never seen the
this.
morality police come and drag the people out of the house for the party.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. But the second thing
Uh-huh.
is that um, some music is forbidden.
Mm-hmm.
and but it's tolerated. But it's, for example, in a government-owned building or on government-owned media,
Mm.
they would not use that sort of music, and it is music that is sexually explicit,
Ah.
or the language, or music that objectifies women or commodifies them or sexualizes them. That would be forbidden, for example, on radio or television. But I've been in malls where you could hear stuff that's quite embarrassing when you're around women and children and so on.
Mm.
It's a lot of it's in English, and I think the people in the mall don't know what exactly is being said.
And thank God
So
they don't.
yeah, that's probably true.
It's a good.
But yeah, so that sort of music, as I said, which is like that sexualizes or objectifies or commodifies women, that's banned. But if someone's doing it, using it or listening to it in his or her car, or no one's going to do anything about it.
Hmm. And see, this is why we have the kind of guests like we do on this show, like Dr. Morandi, who can certainly come and talk to us about the political implications of everything. But you know what? Sometimes political education is best when we just point out the misinformation that you are subjected to about the people in another country. And we get a clear understanding that, you know what? They're just people just like we are. They're no different than we are, and they do basically the same things we do. So we are proud to bring this to you every Friday here on WPFW. We are out of time. I want to thank Dr. Morandi so much for joining us very early in the morning in Iran. We hope to talk to you again very soon. I want to thank all of you for listening. You've been listening to Darker Than Blue here on WPFW 89.3 in Washington, D.C. Please pledge your support for this station. Go to pledge.wpfwfm.org and pledge to Darker Than Blue, or call 202-588-9739 or 1-800-222-9739 to make your pledge become a sustainer. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for Garland Nixon and News Views. Peace, everybody.
Bye for now.
Okay. Wee wee. All right, y'all. I don't know what I did. Let me stop sharing that. I should do that. Yes. All right, y'all. Thank you so very much for joining tonight. You know what I did? I forgot to email Dr. Tawheed. That was my fault. I forgot because tonight is supposed to be um Blackonomically speaking, but this week was really busy and I completely forgot to email Dr. Tawheed. So I'm going to email him this week and hopefully we'll get him on the coming Friday. The chat is shown because I'm sharing the whole tab. There's nothing I can do about that. So you see what you see. That's all there is to that. So I hope you enjoy Dr. Morandi. It's always difficult to get him on because he is in Iran. He's in Tehran, and it's an 8-hour time difference. So it's like 1 o'clock. Well, now it's 2 o'clock in the morning there. But we have had him on by any means necessary so many times over the years. So he was very gracious in being willing to stay up late and talk to us. So that was really fantastic. And I hope you enjoyed it. And if you can, yes, please do support WPFW with a pledge. I don't like asking people for money. I do not, because I know we broke, y'all. We broke. I would love for we need a sugar daddy. I'm cool with that. All I want you to do is give me money for these pledges. That's all. I don't need nothing else from you. That's all I want. So this weekend is also incredibly busy. So much stuff going on. There's Saturday will be Pan-African Community Action, and a couple people from BAP, I think, will be doing some outreach at some community events here in DC. I am going to be trying to get some rest because Sunday I'll be tabling, me and some BAP comrades and some PACA comrades. Will be tabling at the DC African Liberation Day at Malcolm X Park from 12 to 6 p.m. That's this Sunday. So come on out. I will probably be there until around 3 o'clock because I got to make it up to Baltimore. I got to get up the road to Baltimore for the Earn Your Liberation live show in Baltimore. Yes, I'm going to go. And then let's see, Wednesday we've got the DC BAP Mid-Atlantic Teach-In at Sankofa Video and Books on Georgia Avenue. That's the 22nd. That's our teach-in on African Liberation Day, leading up to African Liberation Day at Lafayette Park in Baltimore on the 25th. So, and I think there's some other stuff, but I don't know. I've got a doctor's appointment. I've got a doctor's appointment. I got to go give some blood. I got to set up another doctor's appointment. And then I have another doctor's appointment for the knees because of the osteoarthritis in the knees. And yeah, this is the work. This is what we do. And oh my God, it just, Kamal is rich. Kamal has 2 kids. He ain't rich. So, and they're little. He ain't rich. Mm-mm. Anybody with little people, not rich. This dog, trust me, I'm not rich. No, I'm broke because of him now. So, that's just what dog moms do. We can't help ourselves. So yeah, nobody's rich in this collective, so they can't just front me $600 every quarter for a new fund drive. Although but hey, I'm taking applications for a fund drive sugar daddy, whatever. So we are very busy this week in BAP. Whew. It is becoming difficult. And then at the end of the month, we are planning the stuff I was talking about the creation of Israel at the beginning of the show. We're going to be doing an internal grounding. It's internal, so those of you who are not members of BAP, you can't see it. I'm sorry, but we are going to do a BAP-wide internal grounding on Zionism, what it is, why we should be concerned about it. So yeah, a lot of work. This is what we do. It's difficult to explain organizing to people who don't do it. I mean, so like the events that we plan, they're not like entertainment, and they're not entertainment for us. We can have a lot of fun doing these things, and I generally do. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of grunt work. It's a lot of behind the scenes, not sexy, nobody pays any attention to what you're doing kind of work to make all of this stuff happen. And from 2017, when BAP was founded and launching the campaign of Shut Down AFRICOM, to having Africans in Africa now saying, AFRICOM, get out. We want AFRICOM. And people just tolerating people over the years saying, well, how do you think you're going to get this done? And how do you, and all I have said over the years has been, just watch us, just watch it. And because that's what leadership told us to say, right? We all had to practice doing what we were told, and not being used to doing what we were told, because I'm grown and I'm 56 and you can't tell me what to do, but I'm a member of this organization. And yeah, I'm responsible to leadership. So yes, you can tell me what to do, and you should, and I should respect leadership. So that's what we did, and that's what has happened. So I'm not at all saying that we drove the people in Africa to say, AFRICOM, get out. No, That was always what they were struggling against. We created a campaign that connected to their demand. And we were able to elevate that campaign and then have our people adopted. That's what we do. So we'll keep doing it. And it is an incredibly busy time because of the way, because of the things that are happening. So yeah, I'm gonna be kind of a little bit scatterbrained and a lot on my plate and juggling all the things and yeah, all the time, and probably a little short tempered because I'm tired, and I'm also kind of in a little pain with the knees and still having it, all that at the same time, all that at the same time. So this is, you know, these moments are precious because they're quiet, they're kind of a little bit low key, and I don't have to do a whole lot. So, I'm glad that you all really like us streaming the show. I appreciate you watching. Sean really loves that we have the audience here that you are, and that we're building an audience through WPFW, and we want to see where that goes because we believe it can go somewhere great. So thank you all so much for watching tonight. I'm sorry, no double feature because I messed up. I did not contact Dr. Tawheed this week. That was my fault. I will correct it, and he will, if he's not on vacation, we'll see you next week with Blackonomically Speaking. And until then, please go have some fun, eat something delicious, do something enjoyable with people that you love. Be very good to each other and to yourselves. And as always, a luta continua. The struggle continues. But if we keep fighting, I promise you, victory is certain. Victoria asserta. Until the next time, peace, y'all. Ooh, boy. Golden sunset. What's that look like? Let's see.